Hello everyone and welcome to an incredible attacking game that happened yesterday in the Superbet Chess Classic Romania tournament. It is Alireza Firouzja versus Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, so French number 1 versus French number 2. That's all I'm gonna say. Let's check out the game, as I'm sure you guys will enjoy it. Alireza with white opens with pawn to e4. It's a classical game, as you can see, hour and 30 minutes on the clock. We have pawn to c5, the Sicilian defense, but now after knight f3, e6, and pawn to d3, we transpose into, well, a lot of different openings back and forth, from the Sicilian to the King's Indian attack to the French. Pawn to d5, we have queen to e2, and now knight to f6. We have pawn to g3. Knight to c6, bishop to g2, and bishop to e7. Pawn to a4, b6 stopping a5, and now castle's kingside. We have bishop to b7, and now there is one game where Michael Adams played rook to e1 against Constantin Lupulescu 2 years ago, but here we have bishop to f4 by Alireza, and it is now as of move 9 that we have a completely new game. Pawn to h6. We have pawn to h4, castle's kingside, and now pawn to e5. Maxime doesn't go knight d7, he goes knight to h7, which tells us that he's not just, gonna idly wait to see what happens. He's planning g5, f5, he wants to go forward. So pawn to c3, fights for d4 and b4, also prepares pawn to d4 in the future, queen d7, and rook to e1. We have rook a to e8, and now knight b to d2, and pawn to f5, asking... do you want to capture en passant? And if you are to claim any advantage here with white, you have to do it and start putting pressure on that backwards e6 pawn. So e captures on f6. Bishop captures, also very nice that c3 was played, numbing the power of the bishop on f6. Bishop to h3, going after the e6 weakness. And now you could play bishop to c8, which, adds more defense to the e6 pawn. But this is a move a supercomputer would make, or, your uncle. There are those kinds of moves, but a top grandmaster goes pawn to g5. Okay, h captures on g5. We have h captures, bishop to e5, and okay, you could trade, but Maxime wants Alireza to capture, so he puts more pressure on that bishop. Bishop captures on f6, rook captures, adds more defense to the e6 pawn, and knight to h2. We have rook to h6, going after the bishop. Bishop to g2, and now knight to f6, stopping knight to g4 from coming with such a huge threat. But knight to g4 either way, knight captures, queen captures, and now knight to e5. It would be great if MVL could just advance the pawn to e5. He has support from the knight and from the rook, but the d5 pawn is weak, so he has to get rid of the knight first. But now after queen e2, attacking the knight, MVL goes back knight to c6, and here you can see how strong MVL is, because this is the top move recommended by the engine. To me, knight d7 is much more natural, because whatever white plays, well, obviously not that, whatever white plays, you're gonna get e5 on the next move. And, okay, the engine says, yeah, it's perfectly fine, but a5 white is much better. MVL does continue in the way of the engine. He goes knight to c6, we have knight to f1, and now pawn to g4. Claiming more space here on the king side, we have pawn to a5, now saying, okay, you can capture with the knight, but then your knight is out of the game, and if the knight moves, then the a7 pawn is weak, so it's not the best. After a5, b5, and now pawn to a6. We have bishop to a8, and now rook a to d1, rook to f8, and now knight to h2, preparing to go after that g4 pawn. We have rook to g6, adding another defender, and queen to d2, freeing up the e-file for the rooks. We have knight to b8, going after the a6 pawn, and Alireza plays this beautiful pawn to d4 move, where if you go after the a6 pawn, then rook to a1, again you have problems. For example, captures rook a1, and okay, the knight here is weak, you could defend it with the bishop. If you go knight to c7, then of course just rook captures on a7, so you could play knight back to b8, but then d captures on c5, you give white a very strong passed pawn, and there's no reason to do it. So MVL just plays pawn to c4, we have rook to a1, and now bishop to c6. Okay, we have rook to e5. Now, this is beautiful because Alireza will suffer two tempo moves from MVL, as the knight will go after the rook, but he wants to play rook h5, rook to h4, and put more pressure on that g4 pawn with, let's say, queen e2. Maybe the other rook comes to e5 as well. if the knight moves from b8 and from putting pressure on that a6 pawn. So knight d7, rook h5, knight f6, again attacking the rook, rook h4, and bishop to d7. Adding another defender, but also maybe if you advance the pawn to e5, maybe g4 gets also another defender. So rook e1, preparing rook to e5, bishop to c8, now again putting pressure on a6, and knight to f1. And okay, you can always capture on a6, but it's gonna be a problem for black, not for white. Rook to g5, sort of stopping rook e5, but not really. Alireza plays it anyway, and now rook back to g6. The problem with capturing is that once you capture back, and let's say knight d7, you can simply capture on d5. And that's it. Black resigns here. There's no square for the king. You have to block with the queen or with the bishop, with the rook, so it's better with the rook, but then e6, and here you just resign. That's it. So after rook e5, rook to g6 was played, knight to e3, and now king f7. Trying to maybe trade off rooks along the h-file, but also adding another defender to that e6 pawn. Queen to e2, now putting pressure on g4 and e6, and rook to e8. And it seems like MVL has everything defended. There's no way for Alireza to break through, but look at this, b3. And now if b captures, queen captures, and b5 is coming. So Alireza MVL played bishop captures on a6, and now b captures on c4, which is not bad, but there is a move queen to a2, which is just crushing, as now the king is on f7, so this is a huge problem. And well, if you go for example bishop to c8, you could also play bishop to b7. But the thing is that now after, let's say, captures and captures and knight captures on d5, knight captures on d5, bishop captures, and e captures, you will play queen captures on a7, and now after king to f8, you will simply trade. Captures, captures, and you will pick up the rook on e8. So there's that. And also, if you play bishop to b7 to try and stop this knight captures on d5 sacrifice, it doesn't matter. Just b captures, and now you're going to play knight captures on c4. And okay, the bishop is a problem on b7 now, so there's that. So it doesn't work however you tried, and queen to a2 is an amazing move. Alireza started with b captures on c4, which allows MVL to save the game, but I mean, you will try to save the game just to get a feel of the position that you know, how much MVL was suffering. B captures on c4 was played, and now queen to a2. And now the question is, what do you play here? There's only one move that maybe keeps you alive. What would you play here? So the only move that keeps you alive is, believe it or not, bishop to b5. And probably some of you thought that, and you thought, okay, I'm going to say bishop to b5. I have no idea why, but I'm just going to say it. It's because you defend the rook on e8. And it seems preposterous at this point that is in any way relevant. But look at this. Knight captures on d5. E captures on d5. Queen captures on a7 with check. Now you play king to g8, the move that will not be available to MVL in defending the position, as he played differently. Bishop captures on d5, and now you can simply play knight captures on d5, and you don't care. Or if after bishop captures on d5 you don't capture with the knight, you could also play king to f8. Then the problem is rook to h8 check, and you get checkmated. Rook h8, and now queen to f7 is checkmate. But after bishop captures on d5, you can capture the bishop. That's the whole point. And now there's no problem there, as well, the rook on e8 is defended by the bishop. If it wasn't, that would be a huge problem. Here, black is just winning. So after queen a2, MVL played bishop to c8. He did not find the correct response, and players were under a lot of duress. They've been, you know, trying to reach time control for so many moves. This is move 43. They finally reached it, and you know, they keep playing quickly as if they have, you know, no time on the clock. Now knight captures on d5, and everything works like a charm. E captures on d5, queen captures on a7, and now king to g8 does not work. You don't have a bishop on b5 that defends the rook. So if we try the same variation again, captures, again, you cannot go king f8 due to rook to h8 check. You're gonna get checkmated. So after knight captures, or even, yeah, you're just gonna lose the rook and then you get checkmated. But even if bishop to e6, which sort of prolongs the game, something like captures, and after rook captures, queen captures on g7, You can maybe trade down into this endgame, but it is objectively lost. The rooks versus rook and knight. White is up 2 pawns, completely winning for white. So after queen captures on a7, MVL did find something interesting. He played bishop to d7, and now look at this. Bishop captures on d5, knight captures on d5, queen captures on d7 with check, knight to e7, and now rook to f5 as the knight is pinned, and MVL just plays rook to f6, and it seems he's out of the woods, but there is one move. One move is all that it takes to take down MVL here. Have at it. Prove that you are the French #1, take down MVL, and, you know, take all the glory for yourself. While I give you a couple of seconds. So the only move that wins the game, the key move, and that is rook captures on g4. So you have to see all of that plus rook captures on g4 in order to survive. Maybe that's why MVL did not play some of the lines that we discussed and did not find bishop to b5. Maybe he saw all the way to here but just missed rook to g4. Who knows what happened. But this is what Alireza played. Yeah, okay, the interface gives it a double exclamation mark. I'm not really, you know, I think all of you guys found it, so I don't think it deserves it. But it deserves it if you found it all the way when you know, you decided to play pawn to b3, for example, which I'm pretty sure Alireza is capable of. So now queen to h8. Obviously capturing runs into rook captures on f6 with check, and then you lose the queen, and queen versus rook and knight will be easily winning, plus you're up 3 pawns. So after rook g4, queen to h8 was played. Now comes rook captures on f6 with check. If you capture with the queen, then rook f4 wins the queen, and if king captures, which was played in the game, rook to h4, queen to d6 is even faster, but Alireza played rook to h4, and he was in this position on move 51 that Maxime Vachier-Lagrave resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Once you move the queen, then comes rook to f4 with check. You've taken the g7 square from the king, king g6, and now the mini king hunt begins. Queen e6 check, king to h7, rook to h4 check, and that's it. You have to give up the queen, queen h6, queen to f7 check, king to h8, and the rook captures on a6, or any other, you know, variation pretty much leads to the exact same checkmate. So yeah, that's it. Beautifully played by Alireza. It was a valiant attempt by MVL, and again, we see MVL playing these lines that no one, you know, enjoys playing. He can play them. He can play them all. He can play with the passive bishop on b7, a8, c8, you know, that doesn't end up on b5, you know, even though it should. He can play that. He always plays it, and sometimes it goes really well, but sometimes, you know, if the opponent finds brilliant resources like Alireza did here, and no doubt you guys have as well, he loses the game. But yeah, brilliant stuff by Alireza. I've seen, okay, he did mess up maybe that queen to a1 move instead of the immediate captures on c4 was a little bit better. But I think before that point, someone posted on Twitter that Alireza's, you know, engine-like play was at 99.9% or something. So I've never really given that much thought. You know, if you play well, you know, it's well. I don't really care what the engine says. But yeah, some people are into that, so, you know, sharing that as well. So I hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank E1 Check, Only Bullet, Random Pawn, Douglas van Bandhuizen, and Samuel Kamuli for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.